Greetings, students. It's Dr. Phil here. This is going to be a video on trends in human resource management. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So straight away, we can kind of bifurcate this into two types of forces, the internal labor force and the external labor market with respect to changes in the labor force. So we can think of the internal labor force as the company's workers that, already there. So it would include the employees, and then people who have contracts to work at the organization. So think about like independent contractors versus W-2 employees. The internal labor force has been drawn, of course, from the external labor market, right? So at some point, the company had to hire those external people and make them internal. As far as the external labor market goes, so we think about the individuals who are actively seeking employment. The number and kinds of people in external labor market really depends and helps determine the kinds of human resources that are available to an organization. Now, we note that in the US, and certainly this is the trend in other developed countries as well, we note that we have an aging workforce. So workers aged 55 and older continue to be the fastest growing workforce group. So the number of young workers between the ages of 16 and 24 is actually decreasing. So with that comes some considerations and some challenges for human resource management, right? So planning retirement. Um, Obviously, if they're struggling to find workers, they're going to want to hang on to even older workers that don't, who may have wanted to retire sooner. They're perhaps going to have to find a way to incentivize them to stay on. Planning their retirements, of course, possibly retraining older workers for different roles, um, motivating workers whose careers have plateaued. Sometimes you'll get companies where there are people just kind of seeing out their time to retirement, controlling the rising cost of healthcare and other benefits, and also finding ways to attract and retain young workers. So today's workforce often brings together four or five generations. So the older workers may choose to work part-time, or they might just want to take temporary assignments. They may be better, they're probably better off financially. Perhaps they don't need the money. So, they're just sort of like, yeah, I don't want to retire completely. Or maybe they do need the money, so, they want to work a little part-time type of gig. It creates a need for understanding the values and work habits that characterize each generation. So, for example, the younger generation, less motivated by money, more interested in work-life balance. Older generations, probably more concerned with money. So, human resource managers need to be able to address and bridge these generational differences. So, with respect to mentoring programs, if you understand what a mentor is sort of somebody experienced that helps train somebody that is less experienced. So, as more and more of the workforce reaches retirement age, some companies have set up mentoring programs between older and younger workers so that that knowledge is not lost, but it's actually passed on from the old workers to, of course, those younger workers. So how does the company benefit from these mentoring programs? So I think the obvious answer there, of course, is continuity, right? Because what they don't need is the older people retiring, taking that institutional, operational, administrative knowledge with them, and then the company is sort of got that skills gap and that knowledge gap. So changes in the labor force. We know that the workforce is as diverse as it has ever been. There is certainly growing diversity in race, ethnicity, and gender. The fastest growing racial group is multiracial, and the fastest growing ethnic group is Hispanic. And so immigration, of course, is an important source of growing diversity, and that, of course, is true here in the United States. So HRM considerations regarding immigration, of course, the supply of and the demand for labor, and different types of labor that need different skills, and of course, the need to comply with laws. So skill deficiencies of the workforce. So back in the day, like decades ago, physical strength and mastery of machinery was probably more important. The desired skills today are not really physical strength. They're more to do with mathematical, you know, sort of analytical, quantitative type skills, certainly analytical, verbal skills, interpersonal skills, being able to make decisions, and being savvy with computers and technology. So many employers can accept candidates without an education and then offer training to correct any skill gaps. Um, Manufacturing companies are looking for people who can operate sophisticated computer controlled machinery. So a lot of times those people may have gone to like a 2 year school, not always, but possibly just to learn how to do that. We also have this term knowledge workers. So the idea of a knowledge worker is think of somebody as what, the skill they possess, if you will, is knowledge, right? So like a college professor would be a knowledge worker, right? A lawyer, an accountant would be, an auditor would, these would be examples of knowledge workers, right? And people like that often have many job opportunities, even in slow economies, because it's hard to find people with those skill sets. So training the existing workforce. So there's really two types, or two terms, I should say, two terms that I want you to be familiar with: upskilling and reskilling. So upskilling refers to training employees to improve or expand their current skill set, and then reskilling involves training employees to acquire new knowledge or skills. So perhaps moving somebody from, this job way over to do something completely different. And we note that the pandemic forced companies to match workers to new roles and activities because it was either that or they would have had to have laid them off. Teamwork, of course, is important. I'm sure everybody, in college, you start getting, probably in high school too, K through 12, but certainly in college, we start introducing students to teams and working in groups. And that's one of the reasons why, because when you get into the workplace, you've got to be comfortable, familiar with, and savvy with working in teams. So teamwork increases employee responsibility and control. Virtual teams rely on communications technology to stay connected and coordinate activities. Teams can also motivate employees by making work more interesting and significant, and may also lower labor costs. There may be some synergies there. And also, being agile involves weaving the development process into the organization's activities and strategies. Now, what I will say, just as a quick aside, that it doesn't say here is teams can sometimes be inefficient because you may get people if the team's big enough to where they kind of hide and don't really do any work. So sometimes keeping teams kind of leaner, like less people, is for that reason a good idea. So mergers and acquisitions, often referred to as M&A. So mergers are when two companies become one. Acquisitions is, I think, what the word acquisition means: to acquire, to purchase, to buy. So acquisitions are when one company buys another. And HR, of course, must be involved in resolving inevitable conflicts between companies' practices, because you got, company A, company B, if they merge, or if company A buys company B, probably brings on a lot of company B's workers. Um, they're probably both are used to doing things different ways. That can be a bit of a culture shock, and it can be a bit of a challenge for HR. Now, what about cost controls? So some organizations have a low cost, low price strategy. The obvious candidate for that would be Walmart. So these organizations rely on HR to identify ways to limit costs of maintaining a qualified, motivated workforce. So it's like recognizing, yeah, we know we're going to have these people with certain skills, but we want to keep that cost as low as possible because we're trying to pass that on to our customers. So HR must lower costs without compromising quality, and that's probably more challenging than it sounds. So HRM can help the organization use human resources more efficiently and make HRM processes more efficient. So HRM can support efforts to downsize, re-engineer, or possibly to outsource in order to control costs. So downsizing, this is where HRM is basically going to surgically reduce the workforce. This is challenging because sometimes when employees find out they're going to be layoffs, all the good people leave, all the ones you would have liked to have kept have now gone, and then you're left with the people that you probably would have gotten rid of. So the most valuable employees should be kept, but they are often willing and able to find other employment before layoffs. Early retirement programs are humane, but they essentially reduce the workforce with a grenade approach. It doesn't mean that just because X number of people are close to, Y retirement date, those are the people that you want to lose. So HRM must, of course, boost the morale of remaining workers. So open communication is, of course, necessary to build trust, notify employees of the reason for downsizing, and provide downsized employees with outplacement services. So those are all things that human resources can and HRM can do to try to help motivate and boost the morale of the remaining workers. Okay, re-engineering. So think of this as a complete review of a company's critical work processes, to make them more efficient and able to deliver higher quality. That also means they can save some money. So there might be a little bit of a cost focus and emphasis there. So what are the effects on HRM? So how HR accomplishes goals may change dramatically. HR must design and implement change so that all employees will be committed to the re-engineered organization's success. This often results in employees being laid off or reassigned to new jobs. I mean, what they'll try to do is reassign them first, and then if they're not able to reassign everybody, then it may come to the point of they may have to lay off some people. Now, outsourcing, not to be confused with offshoring. Offshoring is when they take something overseas. Outsourcing is just contracting with another organization to provide services. So it could be, another organization in the same city, same state. It doesn't have to be overseas. Okay, that's a common misconception that I wanted to quickly dispel. It gives company access to in-depth expertise because they're probably outsourcing to another firm. That's all they do. Examples would be like payroll outsourcing. There's a company in Salisbury, North Carolina called ADP, would be a perfect example of that. It's often more economical, and human resources helps with the transition to outsourcing. And then often many HR functions, again, such as payroll, are also outsourced. What about expanding into global markets? Because obviously we live in it's a global world, right? And the workforce is indeed global. So offshoring was what I was talking about. That's where we may move operations to a country where pay rates are lower. Reshoring is when we actually reestablish operations back to the country where the company is headquartered. We've certainly seen a lot of Western companies do that. And hiring from developing nations has some challenges. One is a lack of familiarity with technology and corporate practices. There's often political and economic instability, and it may affect motivation and recruitment. Um, with respect to international assignments, a term you may hear is expats, expatriates. So these are employees that are assigned to work in another country. So human resources, HR must select expatriates carefully and help prepare them to work internationally. Good candidates understand and respect the cultural and business norms of the host country while also having the language skills and technical ability to be able to fit in well, basically fit in well overseas and also make sure that the work gets done. Now, with respect to technological change in HRM, sharing of human resource information. So employees can now access much of HR info through what we call self-service. So think of self-service as a way for you to, at your fingertips, to access payroll info, pay stubs. Maybe you're going to go get a car loan and it's Saturday, there's no one in HR. You can jump on there and print stuff off, would be one example. You can change your tax allocations and deductions. So, change your address. There's all this stuff that's available there for you. Um, it's especially convenient when combined with mobile computing devices, and also being used for management tasks such as compensation and performance management. And of course, it focuses on employee enablement, putting more of that back into the employee's power and at their fingertips. So a HR dashboard is a display of how the company is performing on specific HR metrics. Now, sometimes we'll talk about this psychological contract, the sort of unspoken expectations that the employee and the employer both have. So in today's world, employees are, of course, expected to take responsibility in careers. It's not really up to the employer anymore to help you with that. You got to figure that out on your own, figure that out yourself. And employers are expected to provide perks in exchange. So things like flexible work schedules, good working conditions, more control over their work, training and development opportunities, and financial incentives, just to name a few. Now, in recent years, more people, of course, are job hopping. This certainly staves off boredom and it wins rapid increases in pay and responsibility. So rather than, staying with one firm and you slowly get promoted, you're sort of just jumping around. It's a kind of a way to, basically get more money more quickly. Interesting with respect to collective bargaining. Union membership in the US has been declining since the 1980s. A lot of people find that interesting. But it's also consistent with individual workers taking responsibility for their own careers. And again, people are, kind of jumping around. And, the unions are good. Those people are doing sort of like 25, 30 years as part of that union. And doing very well, good benefits, good pay because of the union. What about flexibility? So the flexibility allows an organization to quickly meet changing needs. So globalization has, of course, I think most people know this now. I'm sure you all do. It's pretty much made the 40-hour work week obsolete. We kind of live in more of a gig economy. People are doing stuff on the side. They work in the daytime, maybe have a part-time job in the day. They work Uber or deliver pizzas at night. And they're typically independent contractors and they're controlling when and where they work. And they probably get the work assignments through an app That's, Lyft is one, of course, example of that. So there's a lot of alternative work arrangements in the current day, right? So independent contractors, that would be like the 1099 people where they have to take out their own taxes. You could be an on-call worker, you could be a temp worker, you could be a contract worker. Contract workers and independent contractors would of course be very similar. So, that's one thing we've seen over the last few years, last probably decade, is you've seen, it used to be a lot more just W-2. You just work for the company, that's all you do, you go home, spend time with your family, go back to work, and so it repeats. Well, you've kind of seen, people are getting away from that. Okay, thanks for watching, and I will see you all in another video.